Everyone. It's so great to see everyone here this afternoon, or perhaps it's still the morning for you, depending on where your internal clocks are at this very moment. We're so pleased to once again be partnering with Masbia, as we have done for a number of years. And so we're really grateful that everyone has donated and that we're able to raise money for Maut Chitim, as is the custom as we approach Pesach. So welcome, everyone. It's my pleasure to now turn things over to Grant to introduce our chef for this morning.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is our fourth annual Masbia pre-Pesach cut chop event. While it's a little different this year, same as last year, unfortunately, Masbia said Jewish Center was the first organization to cancel because of COVID, and we were trendsetters, I guess. But nonetheless, we still felt it was important to do an event this year. Masbia, over the past year, their demand has gone up over 500%, and they've fed over 7,500 families. With Pesach coming, they're expecting over 20,000 families to be fed through the work of Masbia. Masbia will also be ready to serve over 4,000 with over 4,000 ready-to-go meals for Pesach. Thanks to the support of everyone at the Jewish Center, we have now donated over 600 meals to Masbia for Pesach, and we've raised over $3,200. It's not too late. Our goal is to donate a total of $3,500 to Masbia. The link will be up until Tuesday, so I highly encourage everyone to participate. I also want to thank the committee. We have a standing committee who helps, so everyone knows who they are. I want to thank you for your help, support, in putting this together. For the program, the chat will be closed, but you can direct message me if you have any questions, and I will then read them out loud to Bryan. So without further ado, I'm going to read a quick bio of Bryan. Hold on 1 minute. I'm going to read a quick bio of Bryan Gyrka. Bryan has always considered food his passion. From an early age, he was focused on providing eclectic cuisine to anyone who was up to eating his creations. I'm sure we have some good stories from his family about that. Growing up in Central Arkansas, he adopted a love for soulful barbecue, which he has taken to his current foray at Milt Barbecue for the Perplexed in Chicago. Although he loves working with barbecue, his professional training has been in traditional French cooking, hence our menu today. Chef Gyrka has had his recipes featured in multiple cookbooks, as well as online and television publications. A popular personal chef and lecturer, nothing excites him more than discovering new flavor combinations. Since moving to Chicago, he has become well entrenched in the local kosher scene, working at many of the top venues in the area. After manning the helm at Milt Barbecue for the Perplexed as executive chef for 5 years, he took on the additional role as general manager in 2018. In January 2020, Chef Bryan also became the principal owner of Milt's. In his free time, he enjoys spending time with his beautiful wife, 2 daughters, and son, and baseball. I think that really sums up who Bryan is. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the real star of the show, Bryan Gyrka.
All right, can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, well, thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be able to do something here for Masbia. It's a great organization. Alex is an awesome dude, and as I've gotten to know Grant over the past couple of weeks, it seems like you guys are all in good hands. Anyway, so I was asked to do a demo about Pesach, and I wanted to do something that would be useful for people, and at the same time, easy enough to do and different than what you normally get for Pesach. So we're doing a kokafin, which is a very classic French dish. Julia Child, if you guys have ever watched her show, that's one of the first episodes she did like 50 years ago, and bringing French cuisine into American household. It was a pretty big deal at the time. And it works really well for Pesach because it's basically chicken and herbs and wine, things that we have tons of during Pesach. And the other things about this recipe, which is really cool, and I'll be happy to answer questions for you, is that this is a basic braising technique. So you don't have to do with wine. You can do with chicken stock, different flavors, different herbs, different vegetables. You can kind of play with it. So I'm going to start with butchering a chicken into quarters. I don't know if you guys saw the note on that, but you can buy chicken quarters. A lot of people aren't comfortable breaking down the chicken, but there is a small benefit to doing chicken by hand, because I'll show you what we can do here. So I've got a whole 4-pound roasting chicken. I have a nice sharp knife. It's very important that you have a sharp knife. And again, if you're not comfortable with it, just watch and skip this step. I'm gonna have to score the skin here between the 2 legs. Just cut the skin a little bit. See that? Then you can just pull it right back. It pops open like that. And then cut along the backbone here. And it goes right through the knuckle here. It's all flesh. And it comes right off. And the benefit to doing that over the store-bought ones is I took out the backbone here. So it cooks a lot more evenly and faster, and it takes up less space if you're storing it for later. And the other thing you can do if you're in a rush, you can also score the meat a little bit here, and it'll, again, cook faster and absorb more of the marinade. Okay, so I've got 1/4. I'll do the same thing on the other side. Just grab the leg and you pop it back, pulling it out of the joint. And then same thing, go right along the backbone. It takes that off. And then for the breast, a trick I learned a long time ago is you push it down. So you hear the snap, I think you guys heard that. And then you go and you score it right along the fat line here. You can see it changes color. Just go right along it, and it'll go right along the bone, and then you do it on the other side. Again, the benefit to doing this over buying chicken quarter from the store is I can cut out the backbone. So now when I've got a piece here, it's all flesh. And so when you're eating it, you don't have to pick through the bones and everything. And again, it cooks much faster, and you'll absorb more of the wine and get more color into it. Okay? Do that, and I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side. Just go right along the backbone. That's right off. If you're not comfortable doing this or whatever, then skip the step. Same thing. Okay, I got my 4 quarters here. Now, I'm gonna get these and put them into the Ziploc bag. Chicken everywhere. And what you saw with the directions is that you're gonna marinate it for a couple hours or overnight with red wine and herbs. Again, this is a way to get a lot of flavor when you're limited with items and stuff to Pesach. And nothing I have here is something you'll find in a Pesach aisle, except for the tomato paste. And it's not like anybody doesn't have wine. All right, so I'm going to put the chicken in the bag to marinate it. I'm going to switch knives. Put over my board. Cross contamination is really important. All right. So put that to the side, and now I'm going to go with fresh herbs. I chose to do thyme.
Bryan.
Yes.
Bryan, maybe is everyone caught up? Is everyone marinating? Do we need a?
No, you're not doing anything yet. I just tucked the chicken into the bag, and now I'm going to get the marinade together.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. Yeah, I
don't want anyone to be lost.
Just in the bag. Nothing else has happened yet. Okay. So now we're going to marinate it in herbs, fresh herbs, and the red wine. So I chose here fresh thyme and fresh rosemary. If you don't like rosemary, leave it out. If you want to get other herbs like tarragon or chervil or sage even, you can play with it. So if you want to chop this up, rosemary is pretty easy to do. And you can use dry rosemary too, but at least with the thyme, really use fresh thyme. Dry thyme just won't work it for you. Yeah, so just pull off some of that. And same with again, you just take the stems and you pull it against the stem and they fall off. And we'll end up chopping it up. And again, if you want to skip that step, you can put the whole things right into the bag and it'll still get some of the flavor. But this is the way to get most of the flavor into there. And always use a sharp knife. Especially for something
Is there
like
a way
this.
to move your phone a little closer? Some people are having trouble hearing you.
Okay, is this better? Can you hear me now? Okay, all right, so something that's important, especially when chopping herbs, is that your knife is very sharp. If you don't have a sharp knife, it's gonna make it a little more difficult to chop the herbs because they'll start bruising and not really cutting, and they'll turn black and look gross. So I'm just gonna chop these up pretty loosely, not really concerned about being a perfect little mince because it's gonna end up sticking the marinade and you're gonna pull it out anyway. All right, now I'll get my chicken back, put in my herbs, and then we're gonna do a red wine. I did put a note not to use a Merlot, or that's a really muddy, it gets off flavors for cooking. Cabernet is usually my favorite because it's very smooth and clean tasting. But if you, I used a Rioja for the batch I did earlier, and that worked out really well. I have a Malbec here, which I'm going to use. So it's really what kind of wine you like. Yeah, just not a Merlot. So put about a quart of wine in here. 3 cups of it on there. And then it's going to marinate. You can go as short as a couple hours or overnight. It isn't acidic, so it's not going to mess up the texture of the protein. If you're doing lemon juice or vinegar or other things like that, I wouldn't go more than an hour on chicken because it gets really mushy and gross. So anyway, so all I have in here is the herbs and the wine, and that's going to sit all night. And now that it's sat all night, this is what it's going to look like. It's going to have a little bit of a different color, and it's going to be really good. When you take out the chicken, do not throw away the sauce. You are going to need it for later, okay? So now I need to pat down the chicken. And we're going to saute the chicken. But the issue with that is this is really wet. So you need to make sure that the chicken is dry, because once you hit it with this oil, it's going to end up splashing and making a big mess, which you definitely don't want. Hold on one second. So first thing we're going to do is use extra virgin olive oil for the saute. And that's something you generally never do because this has a very low smoke point. However, for Passover, you have limited options. You can use the cottonseed oil or the vegetable oil that they use on Pesach. You can use this. It's going to have a little bit of an off flavor. Try not to have it too hot where it's like smoking a big mess, but it is what it is for Pesach. All right, so I'm just going to coat the bottom here. See that? The pan's already hot. All right, now I'm going to take out the chicken. And you'll notice, most of you notice that white meat tends to cook much faster than dark meat.
Bryan, one question regarding the oil. What would you use if it wasn't for Passover?
Really, any canola, any neutral cooking oil. Avocado oil works well too. Even peanut oil if you're not concerned about the allergies. Any high heat cooking oil works really well. The non-kosher recipes, they use like, lard, use pork fat, but you can use beef fat, chicken fat. You can play around.
Yeah, that won't work for this round.
Yeah, if you have schmaltz around, you can use it. A lot of people have schmaltz on Pesach. Okay, anyway, so I took these out, drying them off a little bit. I'm gonna give them some salt and pepper, and then I'm gonna sear them on the saute pan. So if you're going just dark meat, you have a lot more flexibility in how long it cooks. With the white meat, you have to be a little more concerned, maybe pull it out earlier. It is important that you temp the meat, or at least find a feel, because overcooked chicken is not really good. Anyway, I just put some salt and pepper on it, put it down inside in the oil. And this is a 12-inch skillet, perfect for one chicken, perfect for quarters. And you can also do this whole recipe in the one pan. I know I put it in the recipe where you take it, you pull it off into a pan and you cook it separately. But if you want to do a one pot option, that is certainly something you can do, and that's something normally I would do. But I do know a lot of people have limited amounts of stuff available on face-off. So if you don't have a really nice pot to cook that you can put in the oven, then you can saute, put it, and cook it in something like this or a disposable pan. So try and make it a little easier for you guys. Turn that off. And so your goal here is to get a nice golden brown. It's going to be at least 5 minutes, depending on how high you have it. You don't want it burning where it starts turning black. And don't worry about the brown stuff sticking to the bottom. You're going to deglaze that with the wine. The brown stuff is the best part of your flavor. And one thing I do like to do with the chicken is I only brown it on the skin side. A lot of people have tendency to turn it over and cook the other side, but it's going to keep cooking. And when you have exposed flesh, especially in the breast, it's just going to get overcooked. And you don't even need to waste your time with the braising process because it'll be fully cooked by the time you can get it to the oven. So I'm going to do a quick check. It's pretty pale. There's nothing there yet. So we've got to wait. Don't move it. Don't play with it. In the meantime, we can start prepping our veggies for the sauce. So I've got onions and carrots here, and I got a bunch of mushrooms, which I will show you in a second.
Bryan, what are the smells we should be smelling? And how loud should the popping noise be on the fry pan?
How's the popping?
Asking for a question about the popping noise.
Okay. I mean, it's going to pop because it has the water that is steam coming up and it's mixing with, or not mixing with the oil. So you're going to have some splashback. That's why I try to dry it off as best as I could, because you don't want to have a big mess. If you're concerned about your stovetop, you can line it with foil or something, because you are going to have a little bit of a splash. That's part of that thing. So I'm going to peel the carrot here. I'm pretty big about peeling carrots, only because it's not just for the look, but there is a really bitter flavor on the outside of a carrot. Even for stock and stuff, I'm pretty particular to peel my carrots. Other things like even onions, I don't care as much. If you're making a stock or you're braising, like the paper doesn't have any off flavors or anything, but it's really important for the carrot. Just check. It's starting to get a little bit of color. You guys see that? I'll go a little bit longer. That's beautiful. Almost there. All right, and then size for the carrots and the veggies and stuff, it doesn't really matter that much. You can go, circles. You can use baby carrots if you want. You can go with the size. It really doesn't matter. Keep in mind, you're going to be cooking it in a hot liquid for about an hour or so, hour and a half. So think of how long it might take for a carrot to cook. So I'm going to put these in a quick size. Not too small, not too large. These in here, because they're going to get sauteed in the pan once I take out the chicken. that's ready to come out. I'm just gonna put them to the side here. Look at that. You see the color there? A nice golden brown. I'm gonna turn down the temperature a little bit, so I don't want it to burn. There we go. All right. Now we can put in our carrots. Get a little bit of saute going. I'll put in the onions too. And onions. One thing with an onion is if you want to get a nice size, I'll do a quick tutorial on an onion. You want to keep this core intact. So if you're going to cut it in half, you cut it through the core here, so it stays together. And then you can peel the outer layer.
Bryan, I'm just going to throw this out there.
Yes.
When you're cutting the onion, maybe when you're done at some point of today, if you can share with everyone what made you decide to go to become a chef.
Oh, yeah, we can talk about that. I'm not afraid to talk.
And can you also give a quick recap of where we're at? We're cutting the mushroom.
So far, we marinated the chicken with the herbs and wine, and I've seared the chicken here, and now I'm sauteing the veggies just to get some extra flavor. This really isn't the stuff you want to skip, because this is where we're going to get the browning, the caramelizing action. It's called the Maillard reaction, which is where all the flavors and stuff coming out, and that's really important. And I'm going to do the same thing with the onions to get a little bit of flavor. A lot of people like to skip these steps and just like kind of boil everything together, but it just won't be the same. And so right now I'm just slicing the onion. I'm slicing it horizontally, but not all the way through the core. Because now what I can see, these are all stuck together, and I can still cut them the other way without it falling apart. And I do the vertical cut. And now when I go like this, I have dice. Okay. And these can go right in.
Bryan, as we're cooking,
yes,
what do you recommend? Do you have suggestions of what I know you and I discussed this a little earlier, what to cook it in? A Dutch oven, what type of pan? What do you recommend?
Oh, yeah. So, okay. So I'm doing here with a copper core stainless steel pan. These are great heat retention, and you can put these right into the oven. So I can actually finish the chicken in here. If you have a Dutch oven, like a cast iron skillet, that Le Creuset, like any ceramic pots and stuff, you can use those. If you don't have it for paste-off, again, if you're limited, you can just do a quick saute and then transfer it into a disposable pan, like I said in the recipe. Okay, so here I've got the onions and carrots. They're just going to saute. I'm going to put a little bit of salt and pepper just to get some seasoning. Always season every item. One thing that's really important, I think, for pepper is that don't buy the pre-ground stuff at the store. Get yourself a grinder. You can even buy it for Passover. They have peppercorns with a grinder. The fresh pepper taste is completely different than anything you'll get from the pre-ground stuff. It's night and day. It's completely different product. Anyway, so these are sauteing a little bit. And then I'm going to add my garlic. I have here already peeled. All right, and there's a couple different ways to do the garlic, depending on what you like. So I have a mandolin here. This is an Asian mandolin. These things are great. They're about 45 bucks or so. I use it for a ton of stuff because you can cut really, really thinly, very quickly and easily. Again, it's a sharp blade. You always run a risk of cutting yourself. If you're afraid to do that, you don't want to risk cutting yourself, then you can do different things like using a microplane, which I'll show you in a second, or cutting it with a knife. Again, don't buy the stuff in the oil or the jars, the pre-chopped garlic. It's not the same thing. I like these little slivers because they're a little sweeter than a chopped garlic. I guess it's the way the cells interact when they're cut that it stays a bit sweeter. So I'm just going to do some quick cuts here. Got these little slivers. And if you're not comfortable doing that, use a microplane. This is really cool grater. This is great for zesting and for other things, for ginger especially. So it has these little bitty blades all over here, and you just rub it on here, and you end up with a really quick garlic paste. And it's not going to be quite as sweet as the slivers, but it's, again, another way you can do things. Everyone has a different preference on the way they like. You know, one thing I like to talk about when I'm showing recipes is that, like, there isn't really one way of doing something. There's a lot of different ways. I don't want to get being black and white, being this is the only way to do it. You know, people are very particular sometimes about this is the way, this is the recipe, this is what it says, but they're not learning about why and how to adjust and make different recipes using the same thing. And then here now I'm chopping more garlic as I can. And garlic is good. All right, so I got the garlic, onions, and carrots in here. All right, I'm gonna get my bay leaves.
Brian, just throw this out. What should be in the pan right now?
Right now, I have the onions, garlic, the olive oil, salt. I just put the bay leaves in here, and I'm about to hit it with some tomato paste. Okay. All right, so now we need a teaspoon of tomato paste. And you want to cook that out a little bit because the raw tomato paste flavor is just a little off. So just cook it down a little bit while you have all this in here. And then you're going to add yourself the wine marinade. And then that's going to get all the flavor in here. All right. Now we're going to hit it with the marinade. Extra wine. All right, we can turn this up now. We're not worried about it burning. So I'm gonna turn it up because you want this to boil and start cooking it all together, and you want that wine to reduce down a bit. Another thing that we do normally, if you're doing this during the year, you would actually have flour in here to thicken up the sauce. Obviously, we can't do that on Pesach, so we can get it thicker in a couple different ways. One is reducing this all the way down till it's a thick syrup, which is kind of what I like to do, and you get a lot more flavor. The other thing you can do is use potato starch on Pesach. It's going to have a little bit of a glossy feel more than like using flour, but it will thicken up a little bit. You guys know how to use potato starch? I can quickly explain it. So when you use potato starch as a thickener, you could take like a tablespoon of the powder and you mix it with some water, and you mix it up with your finger so it's not clumpy at all. And then you pour it into a hot liquid and stir immediately. When that does that, it'll thicken up with the heat. If you can't just dump it right in, when you do that, it'll get a little.
Brian, one more.
What's that?
Is the bay leaf necessary? Do we need it?
It's aromatic. It gives you the extra smell, you know, because part of eating is being able to smell, and so the bay leaves help a lot with that. You know, if you don't have it, you can skip. You can leave it out, but it's pretty standard for a lot of stocks and sauces and stuff.
Okay.
You know? Again, you can put celery in here. You can put in here turnips. You're creating like a stew. That's what you're doing. So it depends what you like. All right, so we're going to cook until it reduces down, you know, at least half. You get a lot of flavor.
So 3 cups.
I'm going to pretend that we're doing that, okay? So I can show you.
Not yet.
So now we're going to put the chicken back into here. Nestle it nicely in. All right. So we have that back in there. We can cook it in here, or you can cook it in a separate pan. It's really what you want to do. One other thing I didn't really mention in the recipe. So foil does not like acidic foods. They don't mix. The aluminum will hit. So I try not to have food touching the foil. So I like to use parchment and then foil, which I know I did leave out of the recipe. All right, so flames off. I'm gonna cover this with the paper. And then tightly wrap it around the chicken. That tightly part is important.
I'm interrupting one more time. Well, I shouldn't say one more. I'm sure there'll be more. Does it matter does it change it if you do the chicken, if you cook chicken cut into eighths?
If you cook chicken what?
If you use eighths of chickens, not quarters.
No, it's fine. This is just for show. You can cut it in eighths, so let's cook a little faster. The biggest thing is if you're cooking white meat and dark meat at the same time, you really need to pay attention to that white meat because you probably need to pull it a decent amount earlier.
Okay.
That backbone off the thighs helps equalize it a little bit between the white and dark meat. But to be honest, unless you're only doing the 4, you only have 2 of 2, you've got it all one pan. If you're doing the larger amounts, do all the dark meat in one pan and do all the white meat in another, and you can control that a little easier. All right. So you can actually do the stovetop if you want. You have to really pay attention to the temperature that is not burning from the bottom. The easiest way to do it in the oven because it's an even control on the temperature. Okay, and then I'm going to show you what it looks like, what finishes here. One of the
I'll put thyme and the bay leaves. And once that cooks down, tomato paste.
I'm going to saute some mushrooms. You don't have to add mushrooms to this. Mushrooms are good.
So you don't have to.
So to do sauteed mushrooms, which I'm going to add to the braising liquid, I don't like to cook it with it because mushrooms get really slimy when they cook for a long time.
Bryan, if we're using a Dutch oven, should we use a cover that comes with the pan?
Yeah,
or parchment foil cover?
Those things work really well because they seal nicely around the edges. You don't want to have a lot of steam loss because there isn't a ton of liquid in this braising here. And if it evaporates, you're going to end up with a bunch of dried chicken and all your flavor and all your good stuff's going to just burn to the bottom. So it's really important that you keep it as tight as possible. And when you check it, make sure you cover it back up. And if you see that, like, wow, there's no liquid left, it's running out, you can always add water, chicken stock, even a little bit more if you want. Okay.
Keep the questions coming, everyone.
Yeah, no, the questions are good. All right, so I'm going to do a quick saute on mushrooms. I put cremini mushrooms in the recipe because I really like them. They're meaty. They're little portobellos. So these are cremini mushrooms. They're brown. You can use white button mushrooms if you want. I also got these trumpets. These are one of my favorites. They actually have a buttery taste. Put that down. You can put these in there. I've got some beach mushrooms here. You can play around. Again, you can use what other veggies you like. So do a quick saute on this trumpet here. I'll add in a little bit of the cremini. Why not? Mushrooms are good. We're so limited on stuff that we can get on face-off when I have something a little different. All right. So I got a little bit of oil in there. It is important that you have a hot pan when you cook mushrooms because they will pull the oil pretty quickly. And then you end up with really greasy.
Another question from the peanut gallery here. What can you make with the leftovers of repurposing?
What's leftovers?
If there's leftover ingredients.
What's leftovers?
Novel idea, but just throwing it out. Apparently some people have leftovers.
I mean, so one of the reasons I like this recipe also is that it tastes much better the next day and it freezes really well. And you don't have to stress it because the stuff I'm making today will be better tomorrow. This is stuff I made on Friday. It's going to be really good today, and that's going to be my lunch. So, yeah. The leftovers, I mean, you can always freeze. You know, yeah. All right, I'm sauteing some mushrooms here. I got the trumpet and the creminis in here. Yeah, again, don't disturb these too much because you want to get the nice browning on one side, and then we'll flip them over. And then I got some beach mushrooms here because these are pretty tasty also. They have a nice woody taste. So I can put these in here too. And if you like, you can blister some onions to go with it before on top. I've got some scallion whites because I really like scallions. So I can do that also. Now, again, you can garnish these with whatever you want. Okay. So all I have in here is olive oil, salt, pepper, and the onions. If you see that the pan's getting really dry, add a little bit more oil. But if you feel like you need it, you don't have to. I don't know if you saw, I did season these ahead of time with the salt and pepper because it is very important that you season everything as you go. So if you see these mushrooms, they're getting really nice brown. I don't know if you can see that, but yeah. So we'll just get going. Don't take very long until you see the nice color. You start seeing some good searing on here. Again, sauteing these is not a step you want to skip. All right, and while that's cooking, I'll show you the finished product when it comes out of the liquid. If you can see that.
Okay, another question.
Yes.
How do you clean mushrooms?
You can rinse them with water. Our TRC, my scoffer here, they require that we rinse them under running water and we pat them dry. It's usually more dirt than bugs. Although a couple varieties I've noticed do get kind of buggy, like oyster mushrooms. I've seen invested before.
And then, did you salt the mushrooms?
Yes, so you'll see some people say don't salt the mushrooms because they'll macerate out and then you have all the liquid. If you're working with high heat and you're not over salting it, you'll see it still looks pretty dry. They're not getting soggy and gross. Some mushrooms have a higher water content, but things like this, these are like nice buttery meaty. They're not getting greasy or waterlogged at all. All right. So the chicken looks like when it's done. All done here. That's just from the wine and the tomato paste and the browning. Garnish with the mushrooms, the onions, and some chopped parsley. All that liquid on there. I know what I'm eating for lunch, guys. Got the mushrooms on here. If you don't like mushrooms, leave them out. That. And there we go. Wipe it down. There. Chicken cooked in. All right, cooked in. Okay, chicken and wine. All right. And again, you can do it weeks ahead of time. You can do it now and have it ready for a taste-up. Yeah, it freezes really well. It's a very hearty dish. People really like it, and it's a good way to use up leftover wine. It's a good way to use natural stuff that doesn't require special Pesach shopping, because that's one of my big frustrations when people are freaking out that they don't have the Pesach stuff in the stores. And I'm like, you got veggies and you've got meat. You know, you put potatoes in here. You don't need anything else. You don't need to do any special shopping. So, do you guys have any questions on the braising? All right, on any of the stuff? Grant?
No, I'm just getting that it looks delicious in all caps.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to be having this for lunch.
And I just got a thanks to the chef comment as well. So that was to you, Bryan. Thank you.
I appreciate it. All right, no other questions or anything?
Bryan, maybe now would be a good time for you to give your story.
Oh, so I have an interesting story. So I grew up in Arkansas and I was really focused on becoming a lawyer. So I went to college for politics, got my politics degree, came here, went to law school, and then kind of realized I spent more time in the kitchen than in the library. I just didn't enjoy what I was doing. And so I talked to my mom and I'm like, this lawyer thing, I don't think it's going to work out. So Like, well, what about culinary school? It never even occurred to me that I could make a career out of this. And so I dropped out of law school, enrolled in culinary school, and I've, done really well ever since. Worked in some great kitchens, working for some great chefs. And, I've been at Milt for the last 8 years. It's by far the longest I've ever had a job, and trying to figure out so what happened next? So I've been in Chicago for 20 years, and we'll see what happens.
Bryan, I think it's also important, being that we're here to cook, but we're also doing it as a chesed opportunity in tzedakah. If you could also give a little background on how you've worked with Masbia, but also the history of Milt, because there's a big part of tzedakah involved with that as well.
Absolutely. So I first met Alex, who runs Masbia, about 5 years ago. There was an event, a cooking competition at a shul in the city, and I was invited to compete, so I competed, and so I met Alex with that. Masbia seems like a phenomenal organization. I've chatted with him many times since then, so we've kind of collaborated a little bit. Whenever he's trying to make a big push, and he helps us out a lot, and he's been doing the trailer drive for the last few months because, as you all know, the COVID has taken a real hit for a lot of people. And so food pantries and shelters and stuff have really had to step up. And Masbia it's definitely been part of that. And so, is helping with the fundraisers he was doing last year. I think they're still going on. And then fundraisers like this, I just really like to do some help and give back a little bit. If you guys don't know about Milt's Barbecue, we're here in Chicago, and the thing that was started, our owner, Jeff Ader, started this as a charity, and, not a 501c3, but more of like every penny that was coming in was going back out. And we had charities of the month every single month where we're giving thousands of dollars to these great organizations, many of them not even in the Jewish community, some local ones, some for, the homeless and all these other, causes. You can see a list on our website and Facebook page, but it's always been a big part of what we do. And even as we took over ownership last year, that was something, first thing Jeff said to us is like, please make sure that this is not lost on what you're doing, and that, the charity is still a big part of what we do. And I'm completely on board with that. In the past, we've turned away people that wanted to do franchising of Milts, mostly because we wanted to keep that tradition of the charitable aspect as part of it. If it becomes like a real for-profit enterprise, it kind of changes, the way you operate a little bit and the way you think. So we take it really seriously and try really hard to do what we can. Once we get past over all these COVID restrictions and financial losses, God willing, we'll be able to start throwing cash to as many people as who need it. That the long-winded answer.
It was a good answer. It was a good one.
Yes. No, but thank you for all your help, Grant, and to Masbia and everyone, for doing, the good things you guys do. It's, it's nice to see people that actually, care and try.
Bryan, when do the bay leaves go in?
I put them in when right before I added the liquid. You can put them in when you're sauteing. You can put them in right at the end, right before it braises. You just want them in there to get that fragrance and to get into the liquid. So.
And then when do we pull them out?
Whenever. I mean, they're in there. You cook it with it, so just don't eat them. There's only 2 in there.
You're very uptight, Bryan. You're very.
One of the things it gets a little frustrating with recipes. It's very like step by step, and people are afraid to think of why we do things. So the questions are great, because you can't really ask a cookbook a question. So when you take out the bay leaves, it doesn't matter as much as, I had to put it on a recipe here. It says put the bay leaves here, but if you put it here, it might not make as much of a difference, but it is good to know why. So the whole point of the bay leaves is just to get that little extra fragrance into the braising liquid. If you forget them, it's still going to be good. Okay,
I got a real good one for you now, Bryan.
What?
Cooking on the stovetop instead of the oven, how long do you cook it for? That's a good one.
Okay.
10 points to the person who asked that question.
My favorite answer or favorite question on all these cooking stuff is, how long is it going to take? And my answer is always, when it's done. And my wife hates it when I give her that answer. So there are a lot of factors on what takes it, how long it's going to take. Part of it is the size of the chicken. If it's a 3.5 pounder, if it's 4.5 pounder, it could vary a good 15 minutes. If you're cutting it off yourself, if you cut off too much of the meat, you got a thinner meat, thinner, it's going to take less time. So you really want to temp it. The health departments always say you had to have chicken to 165 degrees, but it's 165 at the peak. So one thing when you're cooking is 325 degrees is that liquid is going to be hotter than the 160. So, or sorry, 165. So when you take it out of the oven at 155 or 160, it's going to still keep cooking. So that's one mistake some people make when they temp something. Oh, it's at 163. I can't take it out yet. No, you definitely need to take it out because it's going to keep cooking. You have a little bit of more flexibility with dark meat. So if you're really concerned about overcooking your meat, go with the dark quarters because those can easily go to 180, 190 and still be good. So if you really don't want to have overcooked chicken, just go straight dark meat. Don't waste your time with the breast. I happen to really, really love chicken breasts that aren't overcooked. So back to the question of doing a stovetop is you have to be able to check it, make sure it's simmering, but not like bubbling too hard that everything's going to burn to the bottom. So if you're confident or comfortable doing it, feel free to do it. You can watch it. You can open it up and close it. If you see that too much liquid is coming out, you can add a little bit of water just to make sure there's still the liquid because it is supposed to be braising in liquid. So does that make sense? I mean, you can do the chicken breasts in as short as 25 minutes stovetop.
The person who asked that wonderful question doesn't answer it.
Did I answer it?
I know, right. Naomi, we don't know. Confidentiality. HIPAA cooking. If anyone should know that, Naomi, it's HIPAA.
Yeah.
All I would ask, as we're about to wrap up, if you're cooking, or even if not, it is helpful to see faces on the screen. If you feel comfortable to turn on your cameras. Many cameras are off.
I want to see what people are doing.
Yeah. Oh, Marlene.
Especially ready for dinner tonight. Yeah, if you are going to have it later today, you can just leave it in an oven at 170 and just let it hold for a few hours until you're ready to eat it. You can also do this in a crock pot or in a vacuum pressure cooker, like the Foodie or the whatever they're called. Those other.
Bryan, can the chicken overlap with each other?
They really shouldn't. The thin parts of the breast can, but you kind of want to make sure everything's in an even layer because you can't control what's happening in between, and you really want them in the liquid. The whole point is to get that braising liquid into the chicken. So if you have a chicken breast on top of a thigh, it's just steaming on top of a thigh. Does that make sense? But yeah, I always say do one layer, don't double layer them because you're trying to save on space. Once they're cooked, it's a different story. And if you're reheating, you can do that, but not for cooking. Anything else?
I just unmuted everyone. So if anyone has more questions, you can use your own voice. I don't have to be the shaliach anymore. Naomi, you're still on mute. I asked everyone to unmute themselves.
How are you?
Bryan, what is your favorite menu item on the menu at Milt's?
At the restaurant. I don't eat too much beef anymore. I've been here for too long and my cholesterol is gaining weight. So I eat a lot more chicken than anything.
Uh-oh, sorry, fire alarm's going on.
Uh-oh. So don't let your oil smoke. Anyway, so for my favorite items, probably the smoked tap chicken. I really, really like it. It's very hard to get a good chicken, at least in the kosher world, that isn't like drowning in sugar and sauce and stuff. And so I take a lot of pride in the chicken, and it's not overcooked. We cook it at a very low temperature, get a lot of smoke flavor in there, but the chicken breast is just as good as the thighs. And it's something that you can't get in a lot of places, and I really like chicken. So if I had to answer, I would say no chicken. But I like it all.
Bryan, thank you so much. This was awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Bryan.
Oh, no problem. All right.
Thanks so much. The restaurant.
Thank you again, everyone. And just as a reminder, post pictures, your final products, tag Jewish Center. And again, if we can reach 3,500 by Tuesday for Must Be.
Yeah, good luck on the fundraising, guys. It's obviously a good charity, okay?
And next year, we're back chopping in the auditorium together.
All right.
Yay.
All right, take care, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
How do I leave?